The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Whoa, how did it get to be Friday so fast? Huh? Yeah, pretty good week, right? Weather, okay. It's starting to get a little cooler, but not too bad. 60s today. 100 days from today is the Super Bowl. 100 days away. So we're into the second half of the NFL season. Not quite, but getting there. And November is the time you start to think about Thanksgiving and football, and then you get into December, though. The NFL keeps stretching the calendar. You know, Super Bowl's in mid-February now. Then comes the combine and free agency and the draft. And, you know, by the time you get to the end of June, the NFL has eaten up all the available space for sports. And then they take July off and get rolling again at the end of July as training camps open. I was going to start with something else, but let me get to this quickly here. Ratings are out for the World Series, and most people going into it said, yeah, this will be the lowest rated World Series of all time. And in fact, it was. It averaged 9.1 million viewers. And to give you some perspective on that, the women's national championship game, which was between Iowa and LSU won, that had a rating of 9.9. 9.9 million people, almost 10 million people, watched the women's basketball championship in college. For the World Series, you had almost 1 million less on average watching. And some of it does have to do, sorry, Wilbon, some of it does have to do with the fact that they didn't have an East Coast team in there. They were down 23% from last year when the Astros beat the Phillies, and they averaged 11.78 million. So nearly 12 million for this and just over 9 million for this World Series. And I think, you know, the fact that the Phillies are an East Coast team and were more compelling than the than the Arizona Diamondbacks had something to do with it. Now, the Wednesday game was the biggest audience they had. They averaged 11.48 million, 11.5 million, jump of 3 million compared to Tuesday night. For Monday night, for Game 3 of the series at Arizona, first game there, 8.1 million. So nearly 1 million less than watching the women's national championship game. The audience peaked at 14.2 million for the final 3 outs. So, you know, word got around, I guess, you know, they're getting ready to close it out. Okay, let's tune over there. Overall, during the season, the pitch clock did help to bring the ratings up with the shorter games. Ratings on regional networks were up 7% for the regular season, with 16 of the 29 U.S.-based teams showing improvement. I don't know what the Nats numbers were, but they were bad teams, so I don't know how much better they were. But nationally, the games, the regular season nationally, they were up a little bit for Fox and TBS, but flat on ESPN. And there was a story this week that ESPN can opt out of this. They don't really even pay much attention to it. You know, they're so consumed with football, as everybody else is who does this for a living, talks about football. And yeah, I don't know what to do about this, but here's my suggestion. It may have nothing to do with how the money works, and maybe even with these ratings, they're satisfied, and, you know, they're saying ratings across the board and all TV are down, so, okay, we'll take our 9 million and not complain about that. Just seems to me, though, the buzz that would be created by playing baseball games in the afternoon would offset whatever bigger ratings they could get at night. I realize if you start the game at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you're not going to even get 9 million people watching it across the country. I understand that. But at one time, when the Pac-12 still had life, and it looks like it's the end at the end of this season, but when they still had life, they were talking about playing their games on the at 9 o'clock in the morning East Coast time. In other words, starting the games on the West Coast at noon. So that they would start at 9 o'clock in the morning. Excuse me. No, it's the other way around. What am I thinking? No, they would start at 9 o'clock in the morning so as to be on at noon and have the full day of their highlights being shown. And it never really got off the ground, but that was given serious consideration. And yes, the television ratings on the West Coast wouldn't be as good. They might be good on the East Coast, if you started at 9 o'clock in the morning. I mean, you're asking your tailgaters to get there at like 5 a.m. But that was under consideration, and I just think that if there was just more buzz about baseball in the long run, it would help. And games that end at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, it's just not going to create enough for the next day for the people who get to work at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. It just doesn't work. But again, we pass another year with the World Series, and we go ratings down, and the previous low was understandable. That's when they actually played the games at the same stadium where the Rangers play, and that was with no people in the stands because of the pandemic, and it was the Dodgers beating the Rays. And the Rays are sort of East Coast, but you're not talking about New York or Philadelphia or Boston or anything like that. And so that was the previous low. Well, geez, they had almost 700,000 more viewers per game than they had for this one. So, and that's how it goes in the ratings business. And I'm just speaking out of my ear. I don't know anything about it. It just seems to me that it was a lot more exciting when we used to have baseball in the afternoon, and we'd have all evening to talk about it and all day the next day. And now we have games that end so late, most people weren't up to see it, and they get to see the highlights the next morning and really don't have any real context of how the game was played. All right, some NBA, and we'll get to the Commanders, and we'll get to the Ravens. We do Ravens preview every Friday. Ryan Mink, who is their editorial director, is going to join us at 10:30 today. We'll also hear from John Harbaugh and on what Dan Orlovsky says about the Ravens. They are an elite team, and the slow start that they had offensively, which was understandable with Todd Monken bringing in the new offense, they're rolling now. They look really good, and they are 5.5-point favorites against a good Seattle team at home on Sunday. But this happened late, NBA, and it may not be on your radar, and it's a sign that everybody who was being cautious about Victor Wembanyama and not trying to raise expectations too high as he entered the NBA, it's an indication of, maybe you should get the expectations that high. You might need a bigger boat on him. Because what'd you hear? Oh, he's only 19 years old. He's very skinny. Greg Popovich knows what he's doing. He's going to bring him along slowly. He's not going to play him in high leverage situations. Well, he's turning them into a good team, and he right now looks like he's the real deal. He's the goods. San Antonio playing at Phoenix last night. They were up as many as 27, but like it works in the NBA, with 4 minutes and 21 seconds to go in the game, it was a tie score, 116. That's when Wembanyama took over. San Antonio went on a 12-0 run with Wembanyama scoring 10 of those points. Spurs won the game 132-121. Wembanyama 15 of 19 in the fourth quarter. And for the game, and who wouldn't take this, just his fifth career game, he finished with 38 points, 10 rebounds, and 2 blocks, 15 of 26 shooting. That's the most points, the 38, third most by a rookie in Spurs history. Only David Robinson had more with games of 41 and 39 in 1990. Well, you got to realize David Robinson in 1990 was 24 years old. He graduated from the Naval Academy in 1988, did 2 years of service, and then joined the Spurs. This was a fully grown man who had played 4 years of college basketball, getting his team to the Elite Eight, which is unheard of for Navy, and he was fully mature. This is Wembanyama. He's a kid. He's 19 years old, and he's now being put in these pressure situations and delivering. He's 15 of 19 in the fourth quarter this year. 78% is the best in the league among the 117 players who have attempted 10 field goals in the fourth. I mean, a lot of them are putbacks, and, he's so tall he could just, kind of drop it in the basket, but still, wow. So all the talk of pump your brakes on Wembanyama, Pop knows what he's doing, it's going to take time. 5 games in, he's scoring 38 points and taking over in the fourth quarter. That's not supposed to happen when you're 19 years old, but it's happening for Victor Wembanyama. And then we have our buddy James Harden. This is what we call a clip and save. This audio that I'm about to play is something we should hang on to and pull it out when things go sour, as they almost always do for James Harden. So he had his first news conference since joining the Clippers this week. The trade finally went through early in the week, maybe it was Sunday night. And he said during this little news conference that he had that his time with the 76ers, he felt the role that he had on the team left him playing on a leash. On a leash. So Harden was asked, excuse me, leash? What exactly did you mean by that?
When I meant a leash, I'm not meant just shooting the basketball every time. I meant like I think the game and I'm a creator on the court. You know what I mean? So if I got a voice to where I can, hey coach, I see this, what you think about this? Then it's like, oh, okay. Like somebody that trusts me, that believes in me, that understands me, that I'm just not I'm not a system player. I am a system. You know what I mean? So somebody that can have that dialogue with me and understand and move forward and figure out and make adjustments on the fly throughout the course of games, that's all I really care about. It's not about me scoring the basketball, scoring 30, 34 points. I've done it already. So that's what I meant by that.
I'm not a system player. I am a system. Yeah, James Harden said that. I am a system. And remember, we played something that Doc Rivers said last week on the Dan Patrick Show about when it went south last season for James Harden. First half of the season, he said they were playing great. Harden was playing like a true point guard. He was distributing the ball. They were winning. Then he didn't make the All-Star game. And he got upset about that, and he went to Rivers and he said, yeah, you're going to have to start playing me with the second team, meaning I need more squeezes. So he wasn't on a leash. He told the coach what he wanted to do, and what he wanted to do was not productive for the Sixers because they didn't win. This was going to be the year last year that with Joel Embiid and Harden, the big scorer, the big twosome, they were going to get it done, and they didn't. They lost in the playoffs to the Boston Celtics, and Harden opted in with his contract saying he wanted to be traded, and then they couldn't work out a trade, and finally they did work out a trade where he goes to the Clippers, and he says he expects to play on Monday against the Knicks. I'm not a system player. I am the system. Embiid, who's been very gracious about all this, even when he was still with Harden, and now even when Harden's gone, he's not going to rip him. He said, quote, I think he did a lot of great things for us. Well, he didn't get you to the promised land. He says, but in my opinion, we gave him the ball every single possession because he's really good. He's an amazing player. Obviously, being that great of a passer, I think we gave him the ball. We give him the ball every single possession, just go out and, do his thing. And from there, he had to make decisions as far as getting guys open or looking for himself. But I thought he did a pretty good job of getting us into an offense and just passing the ball, getting guys open. That's the reason he won the assist title last year. Yes, but he didn't win the championship, and he did not get them to even the Eastern Conference Finals. They lost in 7 games to the Boston Celtics, and Harden was terrible. And so, if he's all about winning championships, he's yet to show that he can do that, and he's played with some great players along the way, and what has he done except score a lot of points? So Philly off to a pretty good start. They're 3-1 after beating the Raptors, and the help that Embiid is getting is coming from a familiar name, Kelly Oubre, with 23 last night, and Tobias Harris also had 23. I'm not a system player. I am the system. Hey. Jack Del Rio talking yesterday. It was a coordinator day out at Ashburn, so you heard from Eric Bieniemy and Jack Del Rio. Del Rio not with much to say, as he usually doesn't, but they finally got around to the Chase Young trade. Now, the other day on, Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday is the last day before today that Ron Rivera speaks. So he speaks Monday, and he speaks again on Wednesday. And he was asked about the trades, obviously. While he was able to talk about Sweat, he said because San Francisco was on a bye, he was unable to talk about the Chase Young trade in any detail. And I guess yesterday, whatever limitations there were, or whether you had to pass a physical or whatever it was, the team announced, yes, we have done that. We have traded Chase Young for a third-round pick with the 49ers. So yesterday, Del Rio was asked asked in a way of like, dude, this is the second pick of the draft. You let him get away for a third rounder? What's the deal here? Isn't this really a bad thing that this all happened, that you're now without Chase Young, who was the second pick of the draft and gave you so much hope for the future, one of the cornerstones of your defense, and you unloaded him for a third-round pick? Here's Del Rio.
A lot of possibilities to how things can come down. There are no guarantees, and I'm certain of one thing, and that is, when that pick was selected back then, nobody envisioned that it would go the way it has in terms of, missed time to injuries and whatever, and then ultimately ended up being traded. So not exactly what we all kind of were anticipating, but look, he's a great young man. Wish him the very best, and for us, we're moving on.
Moving on. Turn the page. We're going to New England. So that's about all we've gotten so far. I guess we're supposed to hear from Rivera sometime today. Maybe he may expound on it a little bit, but I think he's going to take the same approach. Hey, we tried, it failed, we're moving on. And I've always felt since the rookie year, since he skipped the offseason workouts after the rookie year, that they've not been enamored with him. They invested a lot, and they're not going to rip anybody because it's them who made the choice. That's Rivera's call to take him with the number 2 pick of the draft. But I don't think anybody's shedding any tears about Chase Young being gone. One other thing to throw in about the Commanders, we'll talk more about their matchup with New England and the record that Bill Belichick has had against rookie quarterbacks, which technically Sam Howell is not, and other things about the game. But this was from the podcast yesterday that Travis and Jason Kelce do. The Kelce brothers become a very popular podcast. And Jason just finished up the second of 2 games with the Commanders, another close game, another close win. And, you can read what you want into this, but I think for a guy like Kelce, who's been around the league for a long time, this is pretty significant. It's significant praise for a player that he didn't really have to praise. And maybe he's letting his defense off the hook a little bit. Kelce's the center. But this is what Jason Kelce, Travis with him, but Jason Kelce said about playing the 2 games that they have this year against Sam Howell.
It was impressive. It was like methodical.
He can sling it, man. He can sling it. The fighting Bieniemy, man.
Yeah, but it was like typically, and when you're playing quarterbacks that aren't well known, if you make them drive the field and do short dink dunk passes, that's hard to continually do. Not for Sam Howell. He was very on point. He was executing it. He was taking some shots occasionally, but a lot of it was just, it felt like it was death by 1,000 slants. I'm like, Jesus, what are we doing here? Can we get into something for a slant? But I'm sure it's a lot easier said than done. I don't know.
1,000%. Yeah.
All I do know is that Sam Howell has played 2 really good games against us. The Commanders have played 2 really good games offensively against us. I asked Eric Bieniemy after the game, I'm like, yo, brother, what are you seeing, EB? How do we stop this? What are you doing to us? But they've kind of had our number.
Yeah, okay. Well, they lost the 2 games, but they have scored points against Philadelphia and have had 2 close games. They've had some real stinkers this year. Buffalo was a stinker, and they've stunk against bad teams like the Chicago Bears, and their record is what it is. It's 3-5. They lost 5 of their last 6. But at least that's something. That's something that Jason Kelce didn't have to say, and that's what he said about observing Sam Howell. Coming up, a lot of college to talk about, especially with what's going on with Michigan. Will they be able to circle the wagons enough to keep Michigan out of the national championship picture? Who knows? But the chase is interesting. There was a long conference call among Big Ten coaches yesterday, and we finally got a coach who's put his name on criticism of what's going on at Michigan. We'll get to that and much more as we continue with the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630. All right, we got Tony's show coming up today. It's a Friday, so we got that. Also 10:30, we'll do Ravens preview, and this week we are joined by Ryan Mink, who is the editorial director for the Baltimore Ravens. He does a podcast called The Lounge. They have a player on every week. It's quite good, and we're also going to play a couple of cuts from it from this week. They had Mark Andrews on, who is only 1 touchdown away from tying the all-time touchdown record on that team for tight end touchdowns, which would be 41. and it's right now held by Todd Heap, who played, I guess he's been gone from the Ravens for over a decade now, but he has the record at 41, and you got Andrews at 40, so he's right there, and he'll talk about that and the run for the Super Bowl. Ravens are good. They're really good. They're right there among the elite teams, and they're starting to hit on all cylinders on offense, and right now you could put in the discussion Lamar Jackson for league MVP. He won it in 2019, and it looks like he's making another run at it, playing really, really well. And the Ravens are going to be on course here, as they are all season, on ESPN 630, as they've got Seattle coming to town on Sunday, or coming to Baltimore on Sunday, and we start our pregame at 12:30. So what's going on with Michigan? Most people with knowledge, people who cover college football, say, yeah, they're starting to circle the wagons a little bit, but, the NCAA really doesn't want to act on this. And the Big Ten is conflicted, because if they are to punish Michigan, if they are to say, we've got enough evidence here to show that clearly you were cheating, you were going way above even what's considered to be wink, wink, nod, nod, when you're bending the rules to the point where you're stealing signs and you're not supposed to do that. They've already suspended Connor Stallions, who was the guy behind this, that he would buy tickets on either sidelines and use videotape and all the things. It was like, Spygate on steroids, basically. And, if you look at the numbers since this allegedly started happening, Michigan has been a lot better. Now, you could say, they finally got things in gear, that Jim Harbaugh, I always confuse them. Jim Harbaugh had been on the job long enough to get things going, and they're ready to be one of the top teams in the country, as they are. And if the season ended today, they would be in the playoff. They're the number 3 team behind Georgia and the top team, Ohio State. Now, the Ohio State-Michigan game could take care of a lot of things. If Ohio State wins, maybe they knock Michigan out, and everybody's happy. But on the other hand, there is some sentiment in the Big Ten that they want to see both schools in the playoff. Why? Money. And one Big Ten administrator, not named, said in a story in SI.com, quote, that couple of million extra bucks that we make when we put 2 teams in the college football playoff is awfully nice. So that's why they don't want to ban Michigan. On the other hand, you got the Big Ten athletic directors on a long conference call yesterday with Commissioner Tony Petitti on what they should do here, and there is, some sentiment to say, hey, they're cheating. It's wide open. You got to do something about this. Maybe prevent them from playing in the Big Ten championship entirely. Fines, okay, fines. What do they mean now? It's just money. How about suspending Harbaugh, potentially his coordinators? Harbaugh has already been suspended this year for giving hamburgers to players during the pandemic. I mean, just crazy stuff. But anyway, sources said that dozens of games during the 2022 and 23 season, that there were tapes made available of the signals, and that teams have had to adjust. Even Mike Loxley talked about it this past week, that they've got Michigan in a couple of weeks, and he said, oh, yeah, we're going to be ready to change the signs. We're aware of that stuff. So there is a push to do something about Michigan, but on the other hand, they're pumping their brakes a little bit because, that could cost us a lot of money if that happens. And the other thing is, let's say that Harbaugh is suspended again, and let's say they ban Michigan from playing in the Big Ten championship game. Well, they go to court and they get an injunction and they slow walk this thing. I mean, the main idea is just get to the end of the season, and by that time, Harbaugh could be in the NFL. He could be with the Chicago Bears, and I think they would hire him. The history of Jim Harbaugh is, unlike his brother, who's been like a mainstay in Baltimore for 15 years. I think he is number 2 behind Belichick in longevity with one team. So he stays, but the other brother's sort of like Cain and Abel. The other brother, he moves around, and when he does, he comes in, things improve dramatically at the beginning, and then they fall off. And so, here it is at Michigan. It's kind of gone the other way, that they got off to the slow start, lost to Ohio State all the time. Now they're beating Ohio State, and they're in the picture for the national championship. Now, I was watching Tony and Mike yesterday on PTI about this, and Wilbon made this point. It's a good point, that there isn't another coach in the league that's going to come forward and say, hey, we can't have this, because then they start looking at him. Well, not so fast. Last night on his radio show, Purdue coach Ryan Walters came forward with this and said, it's unfortunate, I'm talking about Michigan, and they're playing them this week. What's crazy is they aren't allegations. It happened. There's video evidence. There's ticket purchases and sales that you can track back. We know for a fact that there were a number at our games. And so he's got what he says is clear evidence that they were stealing signs from him. He said, we had to teach our guys a new language in terms of some signals, and we'll operate differently offensively, talking about tomorrow night's game. You might see us in a huddle for the first time this season. So it is what it is, but we're excited to go play, and I think it would make for a great story. So, and he would have, if this is last year, they lost to Michigan in the Big Ten championship game, 43-22. Now, they wouldn't have been in the national championship playoff, but, they could have kept Michigan out had they won that game. But where's it going to go? Who knows? But sometimes when there's smoke, there's fire. And there's some smoke now, but it's smoke that can be tamped down, I think, in time. Pat Forty's been covering college football for a long time. He was on with Dan Patrick the other day, took a look at this, and also looked at what we're going to be seeing at this time next year when the playoff expands from 4 teams to 12. Here's 40 with Patrick.
I don't think Jim Harbaugh is in trouble yet for this. He's in trouble for the other investigation.
Yeah.
But, there hasn't been anything tying this to him as of yet. The question from an NCAA standpoint is you start piling up various level 1 violations, and there's a strict liability rule now that he could get hit for, but that's next year. Like, if you want to go win the national title this year, it's going to be impossible for the NCAA to touch them. I don't think the Big Ten has a whole lot of interest in doing it. Michigan itself certainly doesn't have any interest in penalizing itself at this point. And I think that there's definitely efforts underway to paint this as just, hey, we got a psychopath on the staff who was doing this stuff himself. And that may be the truth. I don't know, but we've got to find that out. But right now it's Connor Stallions on an island in disguise, looking, trying to do who knows what.
Yeah, but why would you do this? You want acknowledgement from Jim Harbaugh. You want to prove your worth to him. You're trying to be on the coaching staff. You want to be elevated. It doesn't make sense that somebody's going to go rogue, and they're probably going to paint him like he was a rogue employee. Well, he was given the information to somebody.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. No, so that's my question. Did the rest of the Michigan staff have no curiosity at all about where Connor Stallions was getting his sign-stealing information? Like, is it just, hey, good stuff, Connor, keep it coming? Or was it, hey, how are you doing this? Where are you getting this?
Yeah.
The other thing, he's pretty proud of himself. He used to be on social media and with his friends and everything, talking about what he was doing as far as, work for Michigan and everything. Do we really think that he wasn't bragging like, hey, around the building, look what I got? I mean, we don't have the proof of that, but human nature tells me that this guy was probably talking to somebody about, you're not going to believe the stuff I'm coming up with on Ohio State, on Penn State, on Michigan State.
Will this affect the quarterback, J.J. McCarthy's Heisman candidacy?
I don't think so.
Is he getting an unfair advantage?
Right. I don't think so. But, the Heisman Trophy has been called like the Nobel Peace Prize of football, where you everything has to be virtuous and lovely and wonderful. And there's a lot of stuff going on around Michigan right now. We'll see how they play the rest of the way, but I don't anticipate that becoming a voter issue.
The last year, the current college playoff format, how's the regular season next year going to be affected?
It's going to be this season on rocket fuel. It's going to be fantastic. At this time, instead of having 5 unbeatens and 8 one-loss teams we're looking at, and really probably only like 3 one-loss teams, we're going to be looking at like 20, 25 teams that are going to still have a chance to get into the playoff. And so I think the excitement level for all the fans is going to be more widespread. There's going to be more speculation, more drama of, hey, you got to win this game to stay in playoff contention. Now, on the other side of it, the top teams will be able to lose a game. There's less at stake in individual games. You're going to be able to lose and still get into the playoff. But I think there's just going to be more excitement for more fan bases nationwide.
Yeah, I agree. I remember when this came out and there were some analysts said this is bad for college football. And I go, no, you got more teams and the games in November are going to be meaningful. And maybe like your schedule and how you treat that. If you have a loss, when you have a loss, if you have 2 losses, can you still get in? Could a 3-loss team get in? I think brings in more fan bases for a longer period of time. And, maybe these bowl games actually mean something.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think that there's just going to be a lot of fascination with how this thing unfolds. And yeah, fans are going to be, I think, eating up the mock brackets and how they look, just like they do in college basketball. And so there's just more involvement, more at stake for more teams. And yeah, people are going to be sweating through all these games in November. Instead of, just narrowing your focus to a small number, it's going to be a much wider number. And then when we get campus games in that first round of the playoffs, I think it's going to be fantastic. The atmosphere is going to be unbelievable.
Well, you hope so. And look, this has been an ongoing debate in college football for years, that the regular season means so much, because if you lose 2 games, you're out of the picture. Well, you lose 2 games next year, you're not out of the picture. So what 40's saying is November is going to be nuts, as teams with 2 losses are still in contention to get in. And is there going to be a Cinderella that's going to advance through all this? The only thing that I'm hesitant about with this college football playoff versus what happens in March Madness, and I love March Madness, it's great, but the games are like 2 hours, sometimes less, and you got, especially in that first weekend, you got all these games going on at the same time. So if it's a stinky game on CBS, you just go over to True TV. Nobody ever goes there except for the tournament, but there could be the best game going on. I don't know if it's going to work that way with all these. Maybe they will. Maybe there'll be simultaneous games in football, because some of these games in the semifinals, they've been blowouts. They were close this year, but in past years, we've had complete blowouts. Of course, this year in the national championship game, it was a joke with TCU, not even really on the same field as Georgia in that championship game. Just got their doors blown off. But that's been the debate. Oh boy, if you water it down with a playoff, and what's going to happen to a team like Georgia or Alabama or LSU, whoever it is at the top, and they've got 3 games to go, and they're in a position to easily lose one. Do you rest some players? Do you have players who have been playing hurt, make sure they don't play to be healthy? It's going to maybe change the focus of how the games are played, but maybe more is good. Sometimes you say less is more, and I think that might be the case in baseball, as we saw record low World Series ratings this year and more playoffs than ever. People maybe have playoff fatigue, used to be, and here he goes again, the get off my lawn guy. But, even the days before, it's a little bit before my time, before they had the divisional playoffs, but used to be American League, National League. You had 2 divisions in each league. The 2 division winners would play a best of 5, and then you'd have the World Series. So you'd have a maximum of, 12 postseason games. Well, now you got a gazillion of them, and even though you only had 5 in the World Series, maybe there's fatigue from that. I don't know. But, with college football, by the time we get to the national championship game, and we've had these 12 different teams playing to get there, is there going to be the same type of, national championship game, another playoff game, okay. Or maybe it ramps up with great excitement. See, the great thing for me for college basketball is the way it's set up, where you got that madness in the first weekend, the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the Thursday and Friday where people take off and hang out in sports bars and watch all these buzzer beaters. Then you get down to the Sweet 16, which is still manageable. And then you get to the Elite 8 to get you to the Final Four, and the Final Four is a great weekend. That to me was second among the sporting events that take place on the calendar. Super Bowl number 1, but I would put Final Four weekend number 2. Love it. The Saturday night games followed by the Monday night championship game, which I know it tips at 9 o'clock, but it's a 2-hour game. I always stay up to watch that. Not that you need to know my sleeping habits, but there we go. All right, coming up in the next hour, Eric Bieniemy talked yesterday, coordinator day for the Commanders, what he says about evolving as a play caller, and also some follow-up on Bobby Knight and his passing, and some really good stuff from Steve Alford yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show. And Keith Smart was on our morning show, Undisciplined, yesterday, and I'll play some of what he said about playing for Knight, including the reaction after he hit the incredible shot to beat Syracuse in the national championship in 1987. Stay with us. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630. Friday means we do Ravens preview at 10:30. Ryan Mink, who is their editorial director, will join us at 10:30. He co-hosts The Lounge, which is a really nice podcast. They get a player on every week, and it's a relaxed atmosphere, and you find out a lot about that player or coach, whoever they have on. So we'll schmooze it up with him at 10:30. Also in this hour, we'll do some follow-up on Bobby Knight's passing. Steve Alford, one of the greatest players who ever played for Knight, was the key player on their national championship team in 1987. He tells a really funny story, and you may have heard this before, but it's really funny as he tells it about appearing in a sorority calendar and what it meant for his eligibility and all the fallout from that. It's a funny story, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Rex Minturn in the studio, and young enough to stay up late and watch NBA, likes NBA. I was just talking about what I read here and looked at some of the highlights from earlier. Victor Wembanyama last night's tie game. Spurs were up by 27 at Phoenix, but in the NBA, a 27-point lead means nothing. So they get to crunch time. 4:21 left in the game. They're tied at 116. And you were still up at that time? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So explain what happened, as it sounds like Wembanyama just took over the game.
Yeah, I mean, he looked like 7'4" KD, like just pulling up from three. That's 2 times this week that he's gone toe-to-toe with KD.
And did KD, what did they show KD's reaction, like, oh my God? Or
not that I know. I mean, it was a close game, so they were kind of, every time Wembanyama did something, he was looking for the ball back. But
wow. 12-0 run, Wembanyama with 10 of those points in the fourth quarter this season. See, this is counter to what we had heard come in. Oh, yeah, Pop's going to take it slow with him. He's 19 years old. No, you're not going to put him in those. He's owning the games. He's 15 of 19 in the fourth quarter, 78.9% shooting. I mean, that's the best in the league for those who've attempted 10 field goals or more. Fifth game in the NBA, 38 points, 10 rebounds, 2 blocks, 15 of 26. The most points scored by a Spurs rookie was David Robinson in 1990 when he had games of 41 and 39, so 38 is 3. But you got to remember about Robinson. Robinson was not only out of college, he played 4 years at Navy. He had done 2 years of service commitment. He's a grown man. He's 20, 24, 25 years old at that point. And this kid he's the goods.
I bet he'll have 50 this year.
No doubt about it as the season drags on. The only thing you worry about is health, but he spends a lot of time on flexibility. I was listening to Ralph Sampson the other day, and he's the comp. If Sampson came along today, he's also 7'4". He'd be allowed to do what Wembanyama does. But in those days, oh, no, he's a big man. Got to play him down on the block. Well, he was really skinny, and he got pushed around. But he had those kind of skills. And he said in his day, they didn't have the training that they have now. And with the way Wembanyama works so much on flexibility, he said that's going to be key, because what can happen is you get the torque, somebody bumps into you, you tear a knee ligament or something like that. But if you're really flexible and in shape, that's less likely to happen. Something to keep an eye on. Eric Bieniemy talking yesterday to reporters about an offense that finally looked like it should have looked for a long time, especially in the first half last week against Philadelphia. But the record says 3-5, and Bieniemy answers to that yesterday.
We're right where we are because this is where we put ourselves. At this particular time, what are we going to do about that? We're not going to dwell in pity. We know exactly what we can be, but when it's all said and done, we need to put consistent behavior on tape. And once we start doing that, we'll give ourselves a chance. We will, I promise you.
Okay, well, that's fine, but the record is what it is, and we'll see if they get going this week against New England. The record, by the way, Bill Belichick against rookie quarterbacks is 27-9. Not quite a rookie quarterback because he's in his second year, but they'll have something ready for him. As for the offense, which is way heavy on passing, This is not an apology from Bieniemy.
I blame Coach Reed for this. But he's always had a saying, if when in doubt, go deep. He learned that from John Madden. But it's not intentional, okay? But we'll continue working the ball and running it. I thought last week the guys did a heck of a job. I still got to become a better play caller and give those guys more opportunities to run. There's a lot of things that I need to continue to work on, just like the players. So as we continue growing together at this stage in the season, we will improve. And I'll say this, that I promise you.
Okay. I like the fact that he's not defensive about it. He understands he has to get better. To me, when you look at the post-game stats of just about every game and you see, Brian Robinson, 10 carries, Brian Robinson, 8 carries, doesn't make a lot of sense. And, there was even some talk that Antonio Gibson might be traded at the deadline since he's so underutilized. But they have both of them. They've had, you got to knock Formica on this. They've had good health this year. They're 8 games into a season. And they're in good shape. So it's not like they're losing people and you can blame it on injury. And they've got healthy, skilled position players, including running backs, a full complement of running backs that you're not using effectively. So good for him for admitting that, and also admitting that he is a work in progress. He's not saying, hey, people doubted whether I could call plays. That's why I didn't get an opportunity. And they gave all the credit to Andy Reid. No, He good for him, and we can do the drinking game, make sure. But this is Bieniemy on how he is evolving as a play caller.
Play calling is actually a lot of fun, which I've known for a number of years. But it's all about making sure that you can be creative. On top of that, you get a feel for what the defense is doing, making sure that you can keep your guys one step ahead of what the opponent is doing, but more than anything, just making sure the overall communication is where it needs to be. So at times, I can't assume that they all know because I didn't spend 10 years with them. I've only spent a few months with them. So I got to make sure that I'm becoming a clearer communicator at times, and then I just got to make sure that I'm growing and putting them in the best situations because regardless of what takes place, I'm always going to point the finger right back here, right back at me, because I always feel I can be better. So those are the things that I'm learning more about myself. It's just making sure I'm humbling myself so I can continue to grow and learn and become a better listener and observe.
If you're taking a shot every time he says make sure, you're drunk by now. But that is his point. I mean, a lot of what he says every week, it's repetitive, but it's positive. And I think that's the message that he's giving to the players. The impression we got from training camp was this guy is a hard ass. I mean, he's pulling players out of drills. He's cussing them out. But I think when he gets behind closed doors, he's very positive with them and a lot of guys coach through the media. I mean, and I think he does that to an extent. He's very positive about his players, and when things go bad, it's his fault. He takes the blame. Players really appreciate that. He will be a head coach in the league, I think, and it may be here. I'm not buying these Belichick rumors that they're going to trade for him, and at 72 he's going to come here and coach the team. I think there is a real possibility that Bieniemy could become the head coach. A lot of it rides on how Sam Howell develops, but we played this last hour. Jason Kelsey, who's played him twice this year, very complimentary. And that's a guy who's been around the league for a long, long time. I mean, he's seen the best of the best, and he likes what he's seeing from Sam Howell. So a lot of that's the future, really, of both of them in this organization rides on how they do together. Follow up on Bobby Knight passing. And if you're old enough to remember this, not that long ago, it was 1987, and Indiana was playing Syracuse in the national championship game. And, this was probably not the best of the 3 championship teams that Bobby Knight had. Steve Alford was their best player, and the game winner was hit by a guard who I think he was like the 3rd guard. I'm not sure he started that many games, but the clutch shot will be remembered forever. And this was in 1987. I think it was New Orleans, and it was Keith Smart burying Syracuse.
Smart takes the shot, and the Hoosiers with 3 seconds. Go ahead.
Nobody stopped the clock. Nobody stopped the clock.
But the clock did stop at the 1 second mark. Syracuse with a timeout. Keith Smart with 17 points in the second half has moved the Hoosiers to within 1 second of a national championship.
So that was Brent Musburger and Billy Packer, 1987. Things were different then. The clock didn't stop. As soon as the ball went through, you had to call a timeout, and I think Syracuse blew maybe even 4 seconds. Musburger said 3 seconds when it went through. I thought it was more like 5, but they let it run down to 1, and Syracuse couldn't get off a shot, and Bobby Knight had his third and final national championship. This is Smart yesterday. He was on our morning show, Undisciplined, and Knight said this, and I was going through all the different interviews that he did yesterday. One of them was with Bob Costas some years ago, and Costas said, "What are you most proud of?" And Knight said that we don't sit around and celebrate our triumphs for too long, that we move on. That's kind of the way he thought. Like, let's not revel in this victory forever. Let's celebrate it and let's get on to next year. Let's move on to the next thing. So that's what Smart pretty much described as to how this was all handled after he hit this incredible shot to win the national title.
Well, it was something that the group did, and that was one of those moments where prior to the season starting, he thought the team could be a good team. And he mentioned something to the seniors on that team, Darryl Thomas, Steve Alford, and Todd Meyer. And he just said, you guys are going to be one of the only the group of guys that graduate from here and not have a Big Ten championship. And I think what he was trying to do was galvanize the team together. And it forced us as teammates to focus on them and how do we help them get a Big Ten championship. And I think that's what he was trying to do all the time. And I think when we got to that moment where we won the game, it was to a point where we felt, who do we play next? He just had the group so relaxed to play. And in that moment, he said, I tell you what, we all were in a team dinner after the game. And when we got back to the hotel, and he said, hey, the bus leaves at 7:15. You remember, you represent your families, you represent the university, and above all, you represent yourselves. So be careful with whatever you do tonight. But the bus will leave at 7 in the morning. So remember those times there. He spoke to the team, and the locker room obviously was in jubilation for what we had accomplished.
Yeah, well, they had fun for a few minutes and then on to next year. And I also have heard, if the bus left at 7 o'clock to get to the airport, but I heard that the day after that, so that would have been a Tuesday, for Wednesday, that Knight required all of his players to be in class. Like, they weren't going to walk around the campus, wake up at noon and get pats on the back all day. They had to be in class or they were in big trouble. Alford yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show, he gets to a story, and I will get to this, about appearing on a calendar and the fallout from that. But the obvious question when you ask someone who played for Bobby Knight, well, what was it like to play for Bobby Knight? Here's Alford.
You had to not ever take things personal. You had to know he loved you and loved you deeply. There were a lot of times, and he said it a lot in coaching to so many players, he'd always say, I want you to be better than you want to be. And I always took that to heart. I never wanted to be that. I wanted him to know that, no, I wanted to be that good as well. But there were days, Dan, that he definitely wanted me to be better than I was on certain days. And you had to decipher everything out and understand what he was saying. And when you did that, that's when I felt like I really grew as a player and as a person.
But I wonder, when you won that national championship, how much was joy and how much was more of just a relief?
Oh, it was joy. The relief part, I think, kind of gets over and kind of dramatized. I think when you're in battle, he was the general. I mean, that's who he was, and that's the foxhole you wanted to be in. And we knew that as players. We were the best prepared team. We felt like we were the most disciplined team. He will tell you, I got an autograph picture on my wall, and he talks about when he wrote the autograph, how great a player I was. Then he put in parentheses, offense. So, so you understand, you understood your role and you went out and played that role the best. But I think it's like anything, Dan, when you put everything in it and then you win it and you have success, you have great joy and appreciation for the process and the journey.
Yeah. Ever think about leaving Indiana?
Never. And there were times that I would call mom and dad and say, "Hey, you're 2 hours away. Come get me." Those things happen because it wasn't easy. It was tough, but I think that's why, I got better. Dan, I was chasing the all-time scoring record at Indiana, which, when you're an Indiana kid and you grow up, man, all the incredible players that played there, and now you're in that. The media is talking about you being this and that, and we're right in the Big Ten chase, and we're going to Northwestern, a team that we had hammered, and then on to Wisconsin, a team we beat 55 points at home, and we beat Wisconsin in triple overtime. But the Northwestern game was the first trip, and if I get my average, I break the school record, and you can't help but think about those things growing up in the state, knowing what you're trying to do. And I can remember after that game, we barely won the game. My teammates played a lot better than me. And coach just ripped me in the locker room. He ripped me in the media. And it was not about scoring. It was all about my leadership. And I really, at that point, maybe didn't understand it. But when we got back from that road trip, I'm like, it wasn't about some individual thing. It was about my lack of leadership and learning how to lead my team through difficult times. And that's what made coach special. He just knew how to do the things that he knew the buttons to press to make you better.
So that's Alfred on the playing part of it. Now, if you read Season on the Brink, which came out in 1986, so it's a long time ago, but this is in the book. This story that Alfred is about to tell was in the book, and here it is from his lips. It goes back to his junior year, and he appears on a calendar that a sorority is selling as a fundraiser. And what it leads to is very, very funny. Here's Alfred yesterday on the Patrick Show talking about appearing on that calendar.
I was the month of February. I was the love month, Dan.
Wait, this is a fundraiser for a sorority on campus.
This was a fundraiser for a sorority on campus for handicapped girls to go to summer camp. And I thought I was doing the right thing. But the wrong thing was you're taught at Indiana, you go to compliance, you go to the assistant coaches, you make sure you cover yourself. And I didn't do that. That was my mistake. And on top of it, it was a Kentucky game. And anybody that knows Coach and the feelings of Kentucky at the time would know what I'm talking about. So the irony of me being suspended for the Kentucky game for a compliance issue really dug deep to Coach. But it again speaks volumes of Coach. He didn't fight it. He didn't try to get administrators or people from the outside to fix it. He's like, no, you made a mistake. And you're going to feel that mistake because it's not just going to affect you, it's going to affect your team. Well, Dan Dockage was our GA at the time. I'd played with Dan for a couple of years. And so I went to Dan. I said, Dan, I've been suspended, but am I supposed to go on the road trip or not? He said, I don't know what to tell you, but I think I'd be on the bus. So I was on the bus. And when you exit a bus for a road trip or any other time, Coach will always hit you on the back as you left the bus. And we got our trench coats on. It's cold. And I'm one of the last players off the bus. And I see him just hitting everybody. I'll never forget, Dan. He hits me, and then he grabs the back of my coat and pulls me back in the bus and says, what are you doing? You're at home. You're suspended. Think about what you did. Support your teammates from home. Find your own way home. So it's 20 minutes from campus out in the middle of the winter. And I just start walking. I see the plane go through the clouds and I'm walking. I get about a half mile up the road and the poor bus driver saw all this. And the bus pulls up next to me. He opens up and he just looks at me. He goes, need a ride? I said, yeah, it'd be great right now. I'd appreciate a ride.
I hope the coach, the bus driver, didn't know that Coach would
Oh no,
find
I think that was just something kept between the bus drivers.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
Yeah, I wonder if Knight said go back and pick him up. That's a good story, and yeah, I guess that gives you an idea of what it's like to play for Knight. There should have been some clarity there. Either get on the bus or don't get on the bus, but get on the bus so he can throw you off the bus and embarrass you some more. And really, the intention, yeah, sure, he should have been on top of things. He should have asked a compliance officer or an assistant coach, hey, can I do this? But it was a calendar to raise money to send handicapped kids to camp? Really? And think of the NCAA now. And that goes to the question that a lot of people were asking yesterday. Could Bobby Knight coach today? Yeah, probably not. He was once asked, would you go to the NBA? He says, I can't go to a league where the players make more money than the coach. And he really wasn't about money. I saw this yesterday as well, that when he was at Texas Tech, so this is already after he was a legend at Indiana. This would have been 2005, 6, somewhere in there. And he gave back his entire salary for the year because he didn't think he'd done a good job. Now, he was making plenty of money in endorsements and other things. Okay, so he didn't need the money. But I was surprised. He was making $250,000 at Texas Tech within the last 20 years. Salaries are higher now than they were, but a basketball coach of his stature, even at that time, seemingly would have been well over $1 million a year. I believe Gary Williams was at that point, and he certainly deserved it for what he did at Maryland. I would have thought Bobby Knight would, but he probably just said, whatever, pay me whatever. I just want to coach again. And so, all those things adding up and, just saying, hey, you better walk home. Now, I do, look, if it's cold and God forbid, something happens, he hurts himself walking back, that screws up his entire season. So, Knight had to have some understanding of the bigger picture here that, yeah, you want to send a message, but you don't want to put your star player in danger or anybody in danger at that point. And I think that sending the bus driver back to pick him up was all part of the plan. Before we get to Ravens preview, we're going to do that at 10:30 as we always do on Friday. Just some business with baseball as the offseason has begun and free agency is about to open up, and it seems like Shohei Ohtani is going to be key to whoever is going to be a favorite next year. If the Dodgers get him, they would be the favorite to win the World Series. If not, maybe it's the Braves. Who knows where he's going to go? Cody Bellinger is a free agent. Blake Snell, Aaron Nola, 130 players becoming free agents yesterday. And the Nationals decided that they were not going to pick up the option on Victor Robles, which was $3.3 million. Robles only played 36 games last year, but they've decided that they'll go to arbitration on him, and they figure he'll get less than 3.3 in arbitration, which he probably will. But it's 4 years. It's only 4 years, and there are now only 2 players on the Nationals that were part of that World Series team. One of them is, of course, Robles, and the other one is Patrick Corbin. And Corbin is going into the last year of his contract. And yes, you do see turnover all the time in baseball, but there were some really, good young players on that team, like Trey Turner, like Juan Soto. And in years past, they would be the cornerstones as you, rebuilt and get your team back on track. And it just doesn't work that way anymore, And Corey Seager, the MVP, he would have stayed with the Dodgers. It just is totally different now in baseball, and you just have to roll with it. But as we talked about, ratings not good. Ratings, lowest ratings ever for the World Series. If you missed this, 9.1 million a game, an average of the NCAA Women's Basketball Championship, 9.9. Almost 10 million people, just over 9 to watch the World Series, which used to be the premier sporting event on the calendar. They've helped themselves by shortening the game, but you got two teams from, that don't draw that kind of interest. They were down, I think, 23% from last year when you had the Phillies in it. And the Phillies are from the East Coast. Wilbon can scream all he wants about East Coast bias and who cares and so what. Well, it matters. And I didn't think the ratings would be affected that much, but obviously they were. Also, you had Houston in, which a team people are more familiar with, having seen them in the postseason all the time. So Texas, kind of new money here, and a team that came out of nowhere in Arizona, you get ratings that are putrid.